when his inheritance changed everything. After 12 years of marriage, I never thought I'd be typing these words. But here I am, sharing my story because I need to process everything that's happened and maybe someone out there can learn from my experience. This is the story of how my husband's sudden inheritance led to betrayal, and how I turned the darkest moment of my life into my greatest triumph. The day everything changed. I'm getting a divorce. I want you out of the house by the end of the month. Those were the words my husband Mark delivered to me one Tuesday evening in April, as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. I had just finished preparing his favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, a special dinner to celebrate his recent promotion at the architectural firm where he'd worked for the past decade. I remember the fork slipping from my fingers, clattering against the ceramic plate in what felt like slow motion. "What? Is this a joke?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's face remained impassive as he took a sip of his wine. "No joke, Jennifer. My Uncle Richard passed away last month. The lawyer called today. I've inherited everything, the estate in Connecticut, his investment portfolio, everything. It's worth about $8 million. He said this with a hint of smugness that I'd never seen before, a strange gleam in his eyes that made him look like a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I don't understand," I said, feeling my chest tighten. "What does that have to do with us getting divorced?" Mark laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was cold and cruel. "Let's be real, Jen. We both know our marriage has been on autopilot for years. Now I have options I never had before. I can live the life I want." "The life you want?" I repeated, still struggling to comprehend what was happening. "We built this life together. We talked about having children next year, about buying that lake house." "Plans change," he cut me off. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. Since the inheritance is mine, you won't see a penny of it. You'll get half of our savings and investments as required by law, but that's it. Oh, and I'm keeping the house. It's in my name anyway since your credit was too poor to be on the mortgage." The calculated coldness of his words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He'd been planning this, consulting lawyers, making arrangements, all while sleeping beside me every night, accepting my love, my care, my trust. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, tears welling in my eyes despite my desperate attempt to hold them back. He shrugged, taking another bite of the salmon I'd spent an hour preparing. "That's not really my problem anymore, is it? You can stay with your sister until you figure things out. I'm sure they won't mind another mouth to feed." That was a deliberate jab at my sister Sarah, who had 3 kids and was struggling financially after her husband lost his job during the pandemic. I'd been helping them out with groceries and bills whenever I could. "I've supported you for years while you jumped from one failed business venture to another," Mark continued, twisting the knife deeper. "Maybe it's time you figured out how to stand on your own 2 feet. His words stung with particular cruelty because they contained just enough truth to be devastating. After losing my marketing job during company downsizing 5 years ago, I had tried launching several small businesses, a social media management service, an Etsy shop selling hand-painted ceramics, a local meal prep delivery service. None had taken off the way I'd hoped, though the meal prep business had been slowly growing over the past 8 months. What Mark conveniently forgot to mention was that I'd also been the one managing our household, handling all the cooking, cleaning, and social obligations, supporting his career by hosting dinners for his colleagues and clients, editing his presentations, and being the perfect corporate wife. I put my career ambitions on hold to be his cheerleader, his support system, his partner. Or so I thought. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my shock gradually giving way to a simmering anger. "Does it matter?" Mark replied, standing up from the table and grabbing his keys. "I'm meeting some friends for drinks. Don't wait up." And just like that, he walked out the door, leaving me sitting alone at our dining table with the remains of a celebration dinner cooling between us. The aftermath. The next few days passed in a blur of tears, panic attacks, and frantic phone calls. I stayed with my sister for the first week, sleeping on her pull-out couch while I tried to process what had happened and figure out my next steps. Mark texted me a list of dates when I could come by the house to collect my personal belongings, making it clear that he expected me to take only what was rightfully mine. He'd already changed the locks. My sister Sarah was furious. That bastard. After everything you did for him? He can't just throw you out with nothing. But legally, that's exactly what he could do, and was doing. When I consulted with a divorce attorney, the news wasn't encouraging. Unfortunately, in this state, inheritance is considered separate property, not marital property, the lawyer explained. Even if he received it during your marriage, you have no claim to it unless he commingled the funds with joint assets, which it sounds like he's being careful not to do. What about alimony? I asked desperately. The lawyer grimaced. Given the length of your marriage and your previous employment history, you might be entitled to some spousal support, but it would be temporary, maybe 3 to 5 years at most. And if he has a good attorney, which I'm sure he does, they'll argue that you're capable of supporting yourself based on your education and work experience. I left the lawyer's office feeling defeated. Mark had all the power, the money, the house, the social connections through his firm. Many of our mutual friends were already taking his side, either because they believed whatever story he was spinning or because they didn't want to risk their connection to a newly wealthy man. To add insult to injury, I discovered that Mark had been methodically cutting me out of our financial life for months. He'd opened individual credit cards, transferred most of our joint savings to his personal account, leaving just enough to avoid legal scrutiny, and had even started a relationship with someone new, his 26-year-old assistant, Caitlin. I found out about Caitlin through social media. Just 3 weeks after telling me he wanted a divorce, Mark posted a picture of them together at a rooftop bar downtown. The caption read, "New Beginnings." Comment section was filled with congratulatory messages, including several from people I considered friends. That night, I hit rock bottom. Sitting on my sister's bathroom floor at 2 a.m., I sobbed until there were no tears left. I felt humiliated, betrayed, and completely lost. The future I had planned, the children we would have, the retirement we'd enjoy together, the memories we would create, had been erased in an instant. But something happened as I sat there, staring at my puffy, tear-stained face in the bathroom mirror. A tiny spark of defiance flickered to life inside me. Who the hell does he think he is? The thought came unbidden, a whisper of the strong, confident woman I used to be before I'd sublimated so much of myself into being Mark's wife. He thinks he's won. He thinks I'll just roll over and accept this. I thought about how meticulously he'd planned his exit, how coldly he'd calculated everything while pretending to love me. How easily he'd discarded 12 years of marriage once something better came along. And I made a decision right there on the cold tile floor. I wasn't going to be Mark's victim. I was going to fight back, not out of vengeance, but for justice. For myself. The strategic retreat. The first step in my journey back to power wasn't dramatic or vengeful. It was strategic. I agreed to Mark's terms for the divorce. My lawyer was shocked. "You're giving him exactly what he wants," she protested. "For now," I replied. "I need this divorce finalized quickly so I can move on with my life." What I didn't tell her was that I'd discovered something interesting while collecting my belongings from our house. Hidden in Mark's home office desk drawer was a document showing that his uncle's inheritance came with certain conditions, one being that the bulk of the estate would only transfer to Mark after a 1-year probationary period, during which the executor would ensure that the funds were being managed responsibly. Mark had lied about already having the money. He was counting his chickens before they hatched and making enemies in the process, including me. So I signed the divorce papers, accepting the paltry settlement he offered. I didn't fight for the house or any of the valuable items we'd acquired together. I took only my personal belongings, my car, which was paid off, and the minimum in liquid assets that the law entitled me to, about $42,000, my half of our modest joint savings. Mark couldn't believe his luck. His lawyer kept asking if I was sure if I was of sound mind. They were expecting a fight, prepared for one, and my acquiescence threw them off balance. "You're making this too easy," Mark said suspiciously when we met to sign the final papers. I smiled, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since the night he dropped his bombshell. "Consider it my parting gift. Enjoy your new life, Mark." The divorce was finalized in record time, just 8 weeks after that fateful dinner. Mark wasted no time moving Caitlin into our home, our marital bed, and flaunting his newfound wealth. He bought a Tesla, took extravagant vacations, and even put a down payment on a vacation property in the Hamptons, all documented meticulously on his social media. Meanwhile, I disappeared. I deactivated all my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and moved out of my sister's place to a small studio apartment in a different part of the city. I stopped contacting our mutual friends and asked my family not to share any information about me with Mark or anyone connected to him. As far as he was concerned, I had accepted defeat and faded into obscurity. In reality, I was preparing for battle. The rebirth. My first priority was financial independence. The $42,000 from our savings wouldn't last long, especially in our expensive city, so I needed to make it count. I returned to what I knew best, food and marketing. My meal prep business, which had been a side hustle during my marriage, became my focus. I rebranded it as Revival Kitchen with the tagline "Nourishment for your next chapter" and targeted a specific niche: busy professionals going through major life transitions, divorce, career changes, new parenthood, or grief. The messaging resonated with people. I shared my own story without naming Mark on my business website and in local business networking groups. I talked about how proper nutrition had helped me maintain my strength during the darkest period of my life and how I wanted to help others do the same. What had been a struggling business with just 7 regular clients quickly grew to 30, then 50. I hired 2 part-time assistants, both culinary students looking for experience, and rented a commercial kitchen space 3 days a week. But the meal prep business was just the beginning. While building Revival Kitchen, I was also quietly working on a bigger plan. During our marriage, Mark had often dismissed my business ideas, but he had been particularly contemptuous of one concept I'd been passionate about: a combined co-working space and culinary incubator for women entrepreneurs. I'd spent months researching the idea, creating business plans, and identifying potential locations, only to have Mark laugh it off as another pipe dream. Now I pulled out those old plans and updated them. Using my growing network of clients, many of whom were successful in their own fields, I began making connections with potential investors. I developed a pitch deck, created financial projections, and started scouting for affordable locations. 6 months after my divorce, I took a calculated risk. I applied for a business loan using the steady income from Revival Kitchen as proof of my ability to repay. With my improved credit score and solid business plan, I secured $150,000 in financing, not enough for the full vision but enough to start. I found a rundown former restaurant space in an up-and-coming neighborhood that had excellent bones but needed significant renovation. The owner, an elderly man named Giuseppe who was retiring after running an Italian restaurant there for 40 years, took a liking to me and offered favorable lease terms with an option to buy after 5 years. When I told him my vision for the space, to help women like me rebuild their lives through entrepreneurship, his eyes misted over. "My Sophia, God rest her soul, would have loved this," he said, referring to his late wife. "She always said women need to have their own money, their own power. I'll help you however I can." Giuseppe became an unexpected ally, connecting me with contractors who wouldn't overcharge me, helping navigate the city's Byzantine permitting process, and even investing a small amount in the business himself. I named the new venture Phoenix House, a place where women could rise from the ashes of their old lives and create something new. The ground floor would house a commercial kitchen that members could rent at affordable hourly rates to produce their food products, cater events, or test restaurant concepts. The second floor would offer co-working spaces, meeting rooms, and a small event venue. But Phoenix House would be more than just a physical space. It would be a community offering mentorship, workshops, networking opportunities, and emotional support for women starting over, whether they were leaving bad marriages, escaping toxic work environments, or simply reinventing themselves at midlife. While overseeing the renovation of Phoenix House, I continued growing Revival Kitchen and building my reputation in the local business community. I joined the Chamber of Commerce, networked at every opportunity, and volunteered my catering services for charity events to gain exposure. I also reconnected with my marketing roots, leveraging my knowledge to create a powerful brand presence for both businesses. Revival Kitchen's Instagram account grew to over 20,000 followers as I shared not just beautiful food photos but authentic stories of transformation, both my own and my clients'. What surprised me most during this period was discovering strengths I never knew I had. Without Mark's constant subtle undermining, I found that I was actually a confident public speaker, a skilled negotiator, and a natural leader. The woman who had once deferred to her husband on all major decisions was now confidently making multiple high-stakes choices daily. I worked harder than I ever had before, often putting in 16-hour days and sacrificing weekends. There were moments of doubt, exhaustion, and fear. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was crazy to take on such risk. But each morning I woke up with renewed determination, fueled by a simple truth. I was building something that was entirely mine. Something that couldn't be taken away on someone else's whim. And slowly, day by day, both businesses grew. My confidence grew with them. The reckoning. While I was busy rebuilding my life, Mark was spiraling in a way that I discovered only later, through mutual acquaintances who began reaching out to me again. His uncle's inheritance had indeed come with strings attached, and Mark was failing to meet the conditions. The executor, a conservative financial manager named Walter who had been his uncle's closest friend, was increasingly concerned about Mark's lavish spending and risky investment choices. According to the terms of the will, Walter had the power to withhold the bulk of the inheritance if he deemed Mark financially irresponsible during the probationary year. Mark had initially charmed the older man, but as his spending accelerated and his behavior became more erratic, Walter's reports to the family trust became more critical. Meanwhile, Mark's performance at work was suffering. His architectural firm had initially been thrilled about his inheritance, assuming it would bring wealthy clients their way. Instead, Mark became arrogant and difficult, missing deadlines and treating colleagues with condescension. His focus shifted from architecture to playing the role of a wealthy playboy. Caitlin, it turned out, had expensive tastes that matched Mark's new lifestyle. She'd quit her job as his assistant, expecting to be supported by his newfound wealth, and was pushing for a diamond engagement ring worth 6 figures. About 9 months after our divorce, just as Phoenix House was nearing completion, the house of cards Mark had built began to collapse. Walter officially determined that Mark had failed to meet the conditions of the inheritance and invoked a clause in the will that redirected the bulk of the estate to a charitable foundation, leaving Mark with only a small fraction of what he had expected. Around the same time, Mark's firm asked him to take a leave of absence following complaints from clients and colleagues. Without the promise of millions and with his career in jeopardy, Caitlin quickly lost interest. She moved out, taking with her several expensive gifts Mark had purchased for her, including jewelry and designer handbags worth thousands. I learned most of this through Lisa, Mark's cousin, who contacted me out of the blue. She had never liked the way Mark treated me and had been following my business journey from afar through mutual friends. "He's been telling everyone that you tricked him into a quick divorce because you somehow knew about the inheritance conditions," Lisa told me over coffee at a cafe far from my usual haunts. "He's convinced you had inside information and manipulated him." I laughed out loud, a genuine hearty laugh that surprised even me. I didn't trick him into anything. He wanted the divorce, set the terms, and I agreed. If he'd bothered to talk to me about the inheritance instead of immediately throwing me away, maybe things would have turned out differently for him. Lisa smiled. "That's exactly what Walter said when Mark tried to blame you for his failures." Walter told him, "If you'd stayed with your wife and made sensible decisions together, you wouldn't be in this mess." I sipped my coffee, absorbing this information with an unexpected sense of calm. There was no glee in hearing about Mark's downfall, just a confirmation that the universe sometimes balances its accounts in its own time. "Is he going to be okay?" I asked, surprising myself with the genuine concern in my voice. Lisa shrugged. He'll survive. The foundation is giving him a smaller monthly allowance, enough to live comfortably if not extravagantly. And if he gets his act together, he's still a talented architect. But he's burned a lot of bridges. I nodded, then changed the subject. I had no desire to dwell on Mark's fate. My energy was focused elsewhere. The grand opening. Exactly 1 year after the night Mark told me he wanted a divorce, I stood nervously in the beautifully renovated space that was Phoenix House, preparing to cut the ribbon at our grand opening ceremony. The building was unrecognizable from the dilapidated restaurant it had once been. Now it gleamed with fresh paint, new windows, and a striking mural on the exterior wall depicting a phoenix rising, commissioned from a talented local female artist who had become one of our first members. Inside, the commercial kitchen sparkled with professional-grade equipment. Co-working space upstairs was filled with comfortable yet stylish furniture, plants, and inspiring artwork. Everything had been thoughtfully designed to create an environment where women could feel both professional and nurturing. What amazed me most was the community that had already formed before we even officially opened. 35 women had signed up for founding memberships, ranging from a 22-year-old baker launching her first business to a 60-year-old former corporate executive starting a consulting practice after a devastating layoff. As I prepared to address the crowd gathered for the opening, including local business leaders, press, and all our founding members, I caught sight of a familiar face at the back of the room. Mark stood there, looking thinner and less polished than I remembered, watching me with an unreadable expression. For a moment I froze, old insecurities threatening to resurface. Then one of our members, a former domestic violence survivor who was launching a line of self-defense products for women, squeezed my hand. "You've got this, Jen," she whispered. "We're all with you." Drawing strength from her words and the supportive energy of the room, I stepped up to the microphone. 1 year ago today, I began, my voice clear and steady, I thought my life was over. My husband of 12 years told me he was leaving me, that I was a failure, and that I needed to get out of his house. I had nothing but a car, some clothes, and a half-formed business idea that everyone had told me would never work. A murmur ran through the crowd, and I noticed a few journalists scribbling notes. I could have given up. I could have believed what I'd been told about myself, that I was a dreamer, not a doer, that my ideas were impractical, that I needed someone else's approval to succeed. I paused, looking around at the faces watching me, women who had shared similar stories of being underestimated and dismissed. Instead, I decided to bet on myself. And in doing so, I discovered that my greatest setback was actually my greatest opportunity. Phoenix House was born from that painful moment, from the realization that so many women need a place where their ideas are taken seriously, where their potential is recognized, and where they can find the resources and community to rebuild their lives on their own terms. The rest of my speech focused on our vision for Phoenix House, our founding members, and the incredible team who had helped bring the space to life. I thanked Giuseppe, who beamed from his seat of honor in the front row. I acknowledged our investors, including several successful businesswomen who had taken a chance on my vision. As the ceremony concluded and guests began mingling and exploring the space, I saw Mark making his way toward me. For a moment, I considered avoiding him but then decided against it. I had nothing to fear from this man anymore. "Congratulations," he said awkwardly when he reached me. "This is impressive. I didn't think you could pull something like this off." "I know you didn't," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "That was part of the problem." He shifted uncomfortably. "I heard your business is doing well. Revival Kitchen, right? Someone at the firm used your services during their divorce. Said it saved their sanity." I nodded, unsure why he was here or what he wanted from me. After an uncomfortable silence, he blurted out, "I made a mistake, Jen. With everything. I let the idea of that money change me." "The money didn't change you, Mark," I said quietly. "It just revealed who you already were." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "I've lost everything. My job's hanging by a thread, Caitlin left with half my stuff, and Walters made sure I'll never see most of that inheritance. And what do you want from me? I asked, genuinely curious. Sympathy? Forgiveness? A second chance? I don't know, he admitted. When I heard about this place, about what you've built, I guess I needed to see it for myself, to understand what I threw away. I looked around at Phoenix House, at the women networking, laughing, sharing ideas, at the journalists interviewing our members, at Giuseppe proudly showing people around the kitchen he had helped design. This was so much more than what we'd had together. This was a vision entirely my own, brought to life through perseverance, courage, and community. I've moved on, Mark, I said finally. And you need to as well. Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it here. A young woman approached us, one of the journalists who had been covering the event. Mrs. Harrison? Or is it Ms. Chen now? I'd love to get a few more quotes for my article. Miss Chen, I confirmed, returning to my maiden name after the divorce. And I'd be happy to speak with you. I turned back to Mark. I need to go. Good luck with everything. He nodded, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. As I walked away with the journalist, I felt a final weight lifting from my shoulders. There was no anger left, no bitterness, no desire for revenge. Mark had chosen his path, and I had found mine. The new chapter. In the 2 years since Phoenix House opened, both it and Revival Kitchen have exceeded my wildest expectations. We now have over 100 active members at Phoenix House, with a waiting list for new applicants. 3 businesses that started in our kitchen have opened their own brick-and-mortar locations, and one of our members secured a deal on a nationally televised entrepreneurship competition show. Revival Kitchen has expanded to 3 full-time chefs and a delivery team, serving clients throughout the city and launching a successful line of packaged meals available in local health food stores. I've been featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences about women's entrepreneurship, and even approached about writing a book about my journey from betrayal to success. My relationship with money and security has been completely transformed. Where I once depended on Mark for financial stability, I now control my own destiny. I recently purchased a small but beautiful condo with a view of the river, the first property I've ever owned in my own name. More importantly, I've rediscovered parts of myself that had been suppressed during my marriage. I've taken up painting again, a passion I'd abandoned because Mark found it messy and impractical. I've traveled solo to places I'd always wanted to visit but that weren't on Mark's approved list. I've made new friends who value me for who I truly am, not as someone's wife or hostess. My sister Sarah's family is doing well too. Her husband found a new job and I was able to help them through the tough times just as they helped me. Her oldest daughter is now working part-time at Phoenix House while attending college, learning entrepreneurship skills that will serve her throughout her life. As for Mark, I hear snippets about him occasionally through the grapevine. He eventually lost his position at the architectural firm and moved to a smaller city where living costs are lower. The last I heard, he was working for a former colleague's firm in a less prestigious role than he once had. Caitlin is long gone, having moved on to another potential meal ticket. Sometimes I wonder if he learned anything from what happened, if losing everything made him reflect on the person he had become. But that's his journey, not mine. My journey continues to unfold in ways I never could have imagined that terrible night when my world seemed to end. What I thought was an ending turned out to be a beginning, painful and frightening at first, but ultimately leading to a life more authentic and fulfilling than the one I'd lost. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that our lowest moments can contain the seeds of our greatest transformations. When Mark told me I was worthless without him, he inadvertently challenged me to discover my true worth. When he pushed me out of what I thought was my home, he forced me to build something that was truly mine. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is underestimating you. It lights a fire that nothing can extinguish. So if you're reading this and facing your own moment of devastating loss or betrayal, know this: it isn't the end of your story. It might just be the beginning of a better one. The end.